Hello and welcome to a special episode of Legal View with Michael Ayala. I'm going to take you through today a deep dive of that motion filed by the new appellate attorneys for Karmelo Anthony. It is an interesting document. It answers so many questions and raises so many more. I'm going to take you through it. We'll try to figure it out, and I'm going to give you a little knowledge as well, let you know where we are in the process and what it might all mean going forward. All that and more is coming up next here on Legal View with Michael Ayala. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining me today on Legal View for this special edition. For those of you just joining us and not really aware, although most of you, I'm sure, are aware, I'm going to be talking about this new motion filed by the appellate attorneys for Karmelo Anthony. This is my man right here, Karmelo Anthony. This is the day that he was arrested. You could see there, just a young man. He was 17 years old at the time. There was a track meet in Frisco, Texas, and he ended up stabbing a young man by the name of Austin Metcalf. There was a confrontation in the stands during a rain delay and a track meet, and the two of them ended up in a confrontation. He stabbed him to death. The case went to trial. He was charged with murder. He was convicted of murder, basically as the sole aggressor, sole provoker of the entire incident. He had claimed self-defense, but he never took the stand. The jury sentenced him to 35 years in prison. Well, his attorney then left the case. It was turned over to appellate attorneys with the public defender's office, and shortly thereafter, the case was taken over by a group of attorneys, Dallas area attorneys, and I'm putting them up now, just a number of them, and I'll just name them off. Gary Bledsoe, he's president of the Texas NAACP. You got Russell Wilson, who's there, former Dallas County prosecutor, Michael Ware, criminal defense attorney, Brooke Cluse, who's with the Crump firm, Sean Deredia, Justin Moore, specializing in appeals. So they're now involved in the case. They've had the case now for a couple of weeks, and they filed their first motion in the case. And that motion was for a new trial. Now, folks, this is not the appeal proper. That's the first thing I want you to understand. This is for post-conviction relief in Texas. Very important to understand. You first have to go to the initial court that did the trial and give them an opportunity to correct any errors. Bring it to their attention and let them know some of the issues you may have. And then the court will look at it, make a decision, and then you move forward to the next step. It's one of the reasons why the defense decided to file this is because, number one, it preserves for the record any of these issues. You can't just raise things out of the blue when you go to appeal. So this does that. Also, and this is another important part as to why this appeals team decided to file this motion, it extends the clock. Normally, you have 30 days to file an appeal after sentencing. What this does, it actually extends it to 90 days. I want to get to the most important part of this motion for a new trial. There was an agreement between the prosecutor and the defense attorney, and this was brought up by the prosecutor. Prosecutor said, look, let's have a clean trial. Now, these are quotes from the motion for a new trial. Prosecutor said, we want to have a clean trial. And by doing so, they agreed to just let the incident speak for itself. They weren't going to bring in any extraneous evidence regarding the backgrounds of either side. They just wanted this case to be judged on the events of that moment. So the defense agreed. I struggle with that idea. Number one, I get what the prosecutor's trying to say. He's saying, let's get all the noise out. all the things that were said about both guys. We could both bring in people to have discussions about who these guys are and what they've done and what they haven't done in the past. Some of that would be admissible, some won't. I'll get into that in just a little bit. And let's just have what he called a clean trial. The defense agrees and says, all right, let's just do that. At that point, I would imagine he's already interviewed, and that's Mike Howard. He would have interviewed Carmelo Anthony, got his story, knew enough about him that that's what he wanted to do. The suggestion would be that maybe there was something in Carmelo Anthony's background that he didn't want out. And clearly there was something in the victim's background that the prosecutor didn't want out. Why make an agreement like that? You can say that that's a fair trial, but if there are other things that need to be considered, you got to get those things in. But here's what that agreement essentially did. And this is why they're claiming this agreement affected Anthony's ability to get a fair trial. What they're basically saying is that the reasons we saw the case the way we saw it. Now, I told people all along, I felt there was something odd about this case. My 30 years of experience covering trials, the way the trial was conducted, the way the defense did their job, it was not a zealous representation based on my experience. A lot of people felt the same way, which is why there was so much chatter around the result of this trial. Did we get everything we needed to get? Did all the evidence that needed to be presented, was it actually presented? Well, we find out no, because of this deal made between prosecutors and the defense. And you can say, well, the defense attorney made the agreement. And we all have to live with that. Yes, I agree. But I got to question why you would make that agreement. Number one, let me explain to you. When you make an agreement, a good agreement, part of the deal is that the parties have sort of equal bargaining power. I can tell you, it is not equal. When you are talking to a prosecutor, you're talking to the person with all the cards, all the power in that relationship. So you've got to keep that in mind when you're making any kind of deals. I'm not saying these kinds of deals aren't made, but they're made under very specific circumstances where you think, number one, it would help your client. Number two, you utterly trust that prosecutor, and you'll see why that becomes an issue, at least according to this motion. You utterly trust that prosecutor is going to keep to his word because it affects the way you go about your trial. When you make a decision like that, where you say, I'm not going to bring in any character evidence, I'm not going to bring out evidence that has, bad information about your client, you're not going to do the same for my client, we're going to let it rest on this. Well, then the way you do voir dire is affected. The way you question witnesses are affected. Whether someone takes the stand to testify is affected. It affects all those things. So if you're going to do that, you better know that this is something that truly benefits your client and you can trust that prosecutor. Obviously, that wasn't the case in this, and we'll find out why. They go through a number of things that happened because of that agreement that affected the right to a fair trial for Carmelo Anthony. Now, again, these are the claims that they're making. Number one, they didn't explore the issue with the jury during voir dire. So you would have started sort of massaging the jury in voir dire, get their sense of how they feel about those types of things. Someone might not like a bully. That's someone you'd like on your jury. So if you're going to bring in that type of evidence, someone's really against bullies. I'd be a great guy. I hate bullies. I'd be a great guy for a jury. So you're trying to find those people. So you're not going about that in voir dire. Here's the other thing, and this is where I found some real problems in this case. The cross-examination of those teen witnesses by the state were problematic for me. I knew that those witnesses gave statements to the police after the incident. And at no point during the cross-examination were they questioned about those statements. Why? Because of this agreement between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. Apparently, according to this motion by this new appeals team, there were statements made by those students Things like Austin was an aggressive guy. He could be a good bit aggressive at times. These are quotes. He often got triggered. Austin and Hunter would not let you disrespect them. So that would have been something they might have been able to get out in front of this jury. Would that have changed things? I don't know. But did the jury get the whole story? I don't think so. Now that I'm seeing this, my fears have been realized. There was something odd going on in this trial, and this was it. They also say, as a result of that agreement, the defense designated no experts. This was another question that many legal experts had about this case. I won't even go as far as calling myself an expert, but I've been around this stuff for 30 years or so. And I said, where are the experts in this case? They could have called someone to talk about Carmelo Anthony's epilepsy. We heard a little bit about it, but they would have called an expert to talk about how that might affect his perception of danger, how that might affect how he feels fear under those circumstances. And I've told you, it's a little bit different when you're sitting up in the stands, 3, 4, 5 rows up. You got folks around you. Fighting in the stands becomes very dangerous. One hit, you're rolling downstairs, you're hitting your head on things. Epilepsy certainly could have been part of the calculation that was going on in his mind. The defense says in this motion, they didn't call the psychologist to talk about adolescent brain development and the fight or flight bonds that happens under these situations, especially at the age of 17. I've been saying this all along. Again, people have an issue with people questioning the result of this case. And I'm telling you, it's not about whether he was actually guilty of murder or not, but did all the information come out? It just didn't feel that way. Let all the information come out and then let the jury make a decision. So that was really the main thing. And this is where we're starting to get to the heart of the stuff here. So apparently the defense was under the impression that they would put Anthony up to testify. Now, this is all in an affidavit that they got from Mike Howard, the defense attorney, during the trial. This was attached to the motion. So this stuff is coming directly from the defense attorney. So now we're finding out. We all wonder, why didn't Carmelo Anthony take the stand? Well, he was supposed to take the stand. But something happened. And it happened because of that agreement. Again, that agreement between the prosecutor and the defense attorney that they would not get into anything involving character evidence or other things that either one of them had done or been in trouble for. When they told him the prosecutor, that Carmelo Anthony would testify, the prosecutor announced the agreement was off. That it never contemplated, in his mind, never contemplated that it involved Carmelo testifying. Think about that for a minute. If you're making an agreement that you want this trial to be just about what happened under that tent, what was said, what was done, why would you assume that Carmelo wouldn't testify and any agreement you're making wouldn't include him testifying? But according to Mike Howard, that's what the prosecutor said. The prosecutor also said that because in their opening statement, the defense mentioned that Carmelo Anthony played chess or liked to play chess, he had vitiated the agreement. He had opened the door for character evidence. So whatever the prosecutor had, and I don't know what that was, he said, if he takes the stand, I'm going to use it. Now remember, he's making this on the fly after his case is already over, after the cross-examination of his witnesses, where the defense did not cross-examine them on things that were going on with Austin and his brother, or any of the guys that were surrounding Carmelo Anthony that day. And now he's shifting gears. Then here's what happens, and this is what the thing says. The judge, who was aware of this agreement, but this agreement wasn't on the record. This was one of those things where they were in chambers. They negotiated this agreement over, I guess, 3 or 4 meetings. No recorder in the room, nothing on the record as to what was said, what wasn't said. So the prosecutor was free to decide at any point whether he wanted to stick with it or not. The defense was too, but I'll get to that in a minute. So what the judge does once he finds out, he says, all right, well, you got to make a decision, defense. Are you going to put him on the stand or not? And he gives them 10 minutes to decide. So the entire defense that they had been banking on, which was Carmelo Anthony getting up there telling this jury his story, they've got to do a 180 and go in the opposite direction and figure out what they're going to do. He gives them 10 minutes to make that decision. Many of the attorneys in the area have said that this is a judge that wants to keep stuff on track. He wants to keep that train rolling down the track. But this is absurd, and that's what they're saying in this, that was another offshoot of this agreement that was actually breached by the prosecutor that put Carmelo Anthony in a position where the trial was unfair to him. Interesting arguments. They also say that agreement affected the sentencing phase because even though the prosecutor said, oh, no agreement anymore, they decided not to call Carmelo. And that's the decision that still is odd. I want to know why or what information the prosecutor might have had that was so damaging to Carmelo Anthony that they didn't want him to get on the stand and be cross-examined about it. Because clearly, they decided it was better for him not to take the stand and be cross-examined by the state on whatever it was they had. Now, it could have purely been that it was so late in the trial they couldn't go back and get that information in about Hunter and Austin. That probably factored in as well, but there was something out there that could have hurt Carmelo Anthony. And this defense attorney made the decision with the family, obviously, because it's ultimately Carmelo's choice, that it was better for him not to take the stand. Then we get to sentencing. And we were all wondering, why wasn't more done in sentencing? Why didn't we hear from the psychiatrist then? Why didn't the defense call more witnesses to talk about what a good kid he was, or some of the good things that he had done? Whatever it was that's out there that he did that they didn't want him cross-examined on, that's fine. But we didn't know that at the time, but we're asking, well, why didn't you do more in sentencing? Well, because they agreed not to, based on that agreement. We all wondered, why didn't the state put on a case in sentencing? That was part of the agreement. So the state rested right away. The defense just calls the mom to talk about loving her son. And that was really it. That was it. So all the jury really had at this point was an utterly one-sided account of this case. And as I said, questions about the way this case went down have now been answered. Now we know why decisions were made. Now we know why, during direct examination of the teen witnesses, when they were being led by the prosecutor, it was the prosecutor who said to them, Carmelo Anthony was the sole aggressor, right? Can't do that on direct examination. There should have been an objection, leading, Your Honor. Carmelo Anthony provoked the entire thing, right? Yes. Objection, Your Honor, leading the witnesses. Let them tell what they saw and describe it in their own way. Kids don't talk like that. Oh, Carmelo was the sort of... No, they would have talked about it in a different way. But the prosecutor didn't want to let them speak freely because they might have mentioned things that he didn't want them to mention. And the defense was okay with it because they had made this agreement. It's the oddest thing. And again, like I said, these agreements are made, but you got to know who you're dealing with. You got to understand your position. You are not in the same position. You're not equal to that prosecutor when it comes to these trials. All right. So all that, again, as I said, begins to explain some of the odd happenstances of this case. This is an interesting argument. And I think most people's response is going to be, well, he's an attorney, he's experienced, he made that decision. And I have to be fair, you cannot know why someone makes the decisions they make. We don't have all the information that he has. One has to assume that he's making that agreement because he thinks it's in the best interests of his client. And I am going to give him that leave. I am not suggesting that he made that agreement in some way to satisfy someone else, because that's just the way he wanted to go about it. Maybe he had some other cases in front of that guy and he was bargaining with him. These things happen, but I don't think that happened here. He made that agreement because he thought it was the right one. So that's an unanswered question. What was it that he was trying to keep away from this jury by making that agreement that no character evidence would come in? Was there something so bad in Karmelo Anthony's background that he felt that was the right decision? And I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's the one with all the information. What this defense wants now is they think there should be a hearing to find out what were the terms of this agreement? Because again, there's nothing on the record. That's one of the biggest problems here. Why not have all these conversations that are in your chambers and discussions on agreements, not on the record? Someone recording it so we can see what happened and you can refer to it later, because now these guys can say basically whatever they want to say. That's not a good thing. I don't care who you are. You wouldn't want that in your case either. But they think there should be a hearing, full-blown hearing, about that agreement that they made. They also say the way the state weaponized that agreement, the way they pulled it right at the right time when they were trying to make decisions as to whether Karmelo Anthony was going to take the stand. Or actually, they weren't even trying to. They had decided he would take the stand. That was their plan all along. But once that came about, he pulled it. This motion says he weaponized it. That's the word that they're using. So in this evidentiary hearing, they want the prosecutor to testify. Trial counsel, the defense counsel, he'll testify. They have an affidavit from his statement as to all these things. They're not making this stuff up. This is coming from Mike Howard, the defense attorney. They have an affidavit attached to this motion. What I'm talking about now is the third thing that they claim caused Karmelo Anthony not to have a fair trial. And this is probably the one with the most strength, the most legs. Some of these others are more nebulous. Again, some of it has to do with strategy. Very rarely will cases be overturned based on defense attorney's strategy and the strategy to make this deal and then to do whatever he did after the deal was reneged upon by the prosecutor. That's all strategy. They're not going to look back and second guess every decision made by defense attorneys. They're just not going to do it. Your best bet is going by the law. They say that there was a provocation instruction that was given by the judge. It was unsupported by the evidence. In order for that provocation charge to be given to the jury, where you say to them, if you find that the defendant provoked the event that led to the death, then he does not have the right to claim self-defense. In order for them to get that charge, they have to satisfy three elements. Number one, the defendant did some act or word that provoked the attack on him. We can debate that. We heard that he was cursing at people. He was belligerent when they told him to leave. But what we don't know is what happened between those 3 to 4 boys that were surrounding him and what was said there. We do know that one of the witnesses, teen witnesses, testified that Austin said, "I'm not going to fight you." And Karmelo was taunting him, saying things like, you guys are all such and such, and I'm not going anywhere. A lot of banter going back and forth. So we can debate whether those words were meant to provoke someone to attack him or the victim to attack him. But they have to show that. Number two, that the words were calculated to provoke an attack. Again, we can debate that. I think reasonable minds certainly can differ. Based on the testimony we heard from the teen witnesses, we can certainly differ as to the things that we heard Karmelo Anthony saying, whether those were actually meant to provoke an attack or was just a kid talking smack, being a pain in the butt, not wanting to be pushed around on that particular day. Who knows? The third thing they have to show is that the act or words were pretext for inflicting harm on the victim. And that's where the argument comes in that the prosecutor kept making. That he left his house that day, put the knife in his bag because he wanted to hit someone, wanted to hurt someone. He went to the tent that day because he wanted to hurt someone. And I don't know how the judge gets there when we had testimony that he was called over by someone. He's only at the tent because someone called him over. So where's the evidence that he went to the tent with the sole purpose of causing a fight? There was testimony he was sitting there talking for 5, 6 minutes with the guy who called him over. The guy who apparently said he didn't know him very well and then had to find out on cross that they had pictures of him with him for a bunch of weekends beforehand. That guy called him over. And he's talking to him for 5 or 6 minutes, no problems, no issues, until they start telling him to leave. That's when things begin to escalate. No matter what you think about what Carmelo Anthony did, can you look at that situation objectively and tell me that that is a young man who went to the tent with the purpose of provoking it? So this particular argument may have some legs. I've felt this way all along. There wasn't enough evidence to suggest that he was the sole aggressor and he was the sole provocateur of this entire issue. So I think there may be some legs on that third one. The others, I'm not so sure. The idea that he needs a new trial because keeping people out of the trial and hiding all the evidence and not letting any of the motions be released to the public, all of that caused him not to get a fair trial. Whether that caused him problems, I'm not sure that's going to fly. This agreement issue, not sure that's going to fly as far as meaning getting him a new trial because, again, that's strategy by the defense attorney. They don't like to overturn jury trials based on second guessing the strategy of defense attorneys. But this third one might have some legs. Because what it does, what they argue is that once you give that provocation instruction to the jury and you tell them, if you find he provoked this, then he can't claim self-defense. They don't even get to consider the self-defense because the evidence was that he provoked it. That's what everyone said. So it was fair for everyone to believe that he provoked it. They don't even get to the question of self-defense. But there's another problem here that might make this difficult. And that's something called harmless error. Based on the way the trial played out, Carmelo Anthony never really telling his story, did the fact that they got the provocation instruction really affect the fairness of the trial? Would it have made a difference if they didn't get the provocation instruction? Would they have decided differently? That's the question when we talk about whether it's harmless error, because many times appeals courts, these types of hearings, these post-conviction hearings, the judge will say, okay, you have a point. Maybe the provocation charge or instruction should not have been given to the jury, but we don't think it would have changed the outcome of the case had they not gotten it. There was still more than enough evidence to convict him of murder. We don't think without this they would have gotten to any other question because the evidence was overwhelming that he provoked this fight. They would have come to the same conclusion. That could be the outcome here, for sure, even if they do find that this instruction should not have been given to this jury. So there you have it. It's interesting. Some interesting points raised. It kind of gives us a sense of what's coming up. This is kind of the appeal light. As you notice, there's no Batson issue here. That's where they start to question whether the judge was correct in allowing the prosecution to strike those 3 black school teachers. You don't see that here. You wouldn't see ineffective assistance of counsel in an appeal because that's what they call post-appeal relief, post-conviction relief. It's another form because in order to prove that under most circumstances, you're going to have to bring in extra evidence. Can't do that on appeal. You have to go for something they call habeas corpus. So that will happen after the appeal, but that's certainly an issue they're raised. But you notice you don't see that Batson challenge here. So this is not the full appeal. This is that preliminary appeal. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. In the coming days, the judge is going to have to make a decision. It's He's going to walk away on his own, or it'll just be assigned to another judge, and they'll have to make a decision if there should be a new trial granted here. I think the odds are certainly against that being granted at this point. But it's really just step one in a long process. And I know many of you feel like Carmelo Anthony is guilty of murder, and you're worried about all this, or you just feel like anybody who's talking about this is somehow supporting Carmelo. No, this is about the rights that are granted to defendants, any defendant, the guiltiest defendant. Corey Richins just made the same motion. You know who Corey Richins is. She poisoned her husband, was convicted of killing him. And now she wants a new trial because she felt that the judge was biased and mean to the defense, and that affected the way the jury saw the case. So even Corey Richins wants a new trial. She's exercising her rights, and she should be able to. And no, they should not be penalized. Many of people online are like, well, if he's going to do this, he should get more time if they're found to be a fair trial. No, no, no. You shouldn't be penalized because you are exercising your rights. The Constitution is set up the way it is. Before they take away your liberty, 35 years of your life at 19 years old, you have all these things to go through to make sure that you got a fair trial. And that's essentially what they're doing. So there you have it. Hopefully you learned a little bit. And we'll have to wait and see. The next step is, now that this has been filed, prosecution gets an opportunity to answer. They'll answer these allegations, explain their point of view. And once that is filed, I'm going to get back to you and go just as hard on what they're talking about and the things that they say as I went on this part of the trial, the defense's appeal. So the defense's motion for a new trial. So I want to thank you so much for sticking with me throughout this. And again, as I said, I hope you learned something. I hope this clarified some things. It certainly clarified things for me, raised some other questions. Most notably, what exactly was in the background of Carmelo Anthony that A, made his defense attorney, Mike Howard, agree to this deal, and then once it was allegedly reneged on by the prosecutor, what made him not want to put Carmelo on the stand because of that information? Those are the remaining questions that I have. Hopefully in the coming days, we'll get more answers to those things. But right now, that's going to do it for me. Folks, thank you so much for watching Legal View. Thank you so much for all your support. And we'll be speaking to you very, very soon. Have a fantastic day.